So that concludes the first show. This is the second show.
Yeah.
I encourage you
This is kind of the behind the scenes show. So now we get to let it all hang out and just kind of.
Yeah, I'm about to go get me a drink. So.
Or Nico.
Now I can stop muting my mic while I eat my Chex Mix.
Right. Mark, I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too. This is awesome.
Yeah, this was.
Than I anticipated. I thought this was going to be a good conversation. For me, like I said, I'm a non-Christian. I'm a non-Christian who thinks Jesus is awesome.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. I totally dig it.
So I think that's what Mark was talking about. Like, there's a lot of Muslims who think the same thing. They're like, Jesus is cool. I just don't think he's like, the Son of God and everything. It's just,
Yeah. And you see, and I will, to follow up on your point, when I think when Christians conflate the Bible with the Constitution or politics, they create walls and they prevent conversations about who Jesus Christ actually is. When really the Jesus of the Bible told us really a couple of major commandments. In Matthew 28, he tells us to go and make disciples. In Matthew 22, he says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. These are, he tells us at the end of that particular presentation he was making, he says the totality of the prophets and the law are summed up in these two. Love God with all your heart, soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor. Now, I'll have that conversation. You and I could have that conversation, Marcus, because we don't have walls built up that are political, that say, yeah, I want you to believe that, Marcus, but I also want to make sure you conform to what I believe the lifestyle you're supposed to conform to.
Right.
Yeah.
This is where Christians get all mangled, and we really do a disservice in fulfilling the two great commands that Jesus actually did tell us to do. He never once said, take back Jerusalem. Now imagine this, the God of the universe on the planet, surrounded by hundreds of people, getting ready to ascend into heaven. He doesn't look to them in his final words, and we all know kind of final words matter in life. In his final words, he doesn't say, okay, I want you to go and make disciples, and I want you to take back Jerusalem. I want you to run for office there, and I want you to become the new. He doesn't say any of this stuff to them.
Right.
And now I'm arguing from silence. I get that. But with Jesus, I think you can argue from silence. There's certain things he didn't say because he didn't mean to say them. He didn't want to instruct his followers to go engage politics, become a Republican, run for office, and then force your Christian ethos down the throats of 320 million people. No, and that's where Christians got hurt.
In fact, what he did was quite the opposite. When he was pressed about the kingdom of God,
here we go,
and the kingdom on earth, he was like, "We're not talking about about the kind of kingdom that you're talking about. This is a whole This is a whole different ball game. We're not talking about that kind of kingdom. Like y'all are again back to that metaphor about the womb. Like we're not talking about a womb. We're talking about the expanse of earth. This ain't no womb. This is something completely different. And so like to that extent, like the kingdom of heaven is a completely different. We can't even fathom it. Eye has not seen and ear has not heard.
Right. Exactly.
What God has ready for those who love him. It's a thing that human beings tend to do, right? We tend to try to place our constraints, our understandings on something that we struggle to understand. Sometimes that's good because it helps us to like through metaphor or other things, it helps us to understand. But ultimately, it's going to fall flat at some point because it cannot perfectly represent the real thing that we're trying to describe or trying to understand.
Well, this is true. And this is where we have to think these things through. We've got to really try to devoid ourselves of the emotional knee-jerk reactions that we tend to have to somebody who we don't agree with, or somebody who's leading a lifestyle we don't agree with, or some... Right. ideology that we don't agree with. We have to sometimes figure out a way to divorce ourselves emotionally so that we can kick into our left side brain and begin to think this through. Because at some point we have to offer a viable framework, of what a voluntary society can look like. And this is where I really enjoy that kind of conversation about what does it practically look like. And let me just give you a little framework that I had kind of developed to help me communicate this. It begins with asking people to consider the distinctions between governance and government. And I'm struggling with this, honestly, guys. This is something that I'm really working on in my ability to communicate this, because we have seemed to rested on the idea that you can't have governance without government. And the voluntary anarchist is going to have to say, no, we can have governance without government. And we have to make that case. Now, what are some practical realities to that? I look at HOAs as governance. You agree to it. It's a contract. You agreed into it.
Right.
And the government that is within there has a kind of homogeneity to it because everybody there has agreed to be there because you signed a contract when you bought your house in an HOA. So the functions of the HOA within that small community can be considered legitimate because you've got 100% agreement for the HOA.
Right.
Now, in most HOAs, they have some kind of a board system where you can run for board and you can change it. So you have this ability even there to change that. I look at my community of 140 homes here. We absolutely do not need government here at all, but we would want governance in our community. So for example, let's say one of our neighbors goes haywire and starts beating his wife. Let's use the worst kind of examples, or molesting his children. What are we going to do about that? There's no government. There's no 911.
Did you say that?
We gonna jump in. Guess what, bud? We got a blanket party waiting for you.
Yeah, exactly. So my neighbors, I'm a man who has embraced Jesus Christ as my Savior. My first wave is going to be, let me go over to knock on his door, verify the evidence. Let me make sure what I'm hearing is true. Let me talk to see.
But not
how
a
far
no-knock raid, right?
Right. No knock raid. I'm not just going to pound his door. It's going to be, hey, I'm Mark. I'm your neighbor.
Right.
There's some talk going around the neighborhood that there's some kind of something going wrong in your home. I want to help. How can I help you? How can I? My wife and I are trained in marriage counseling, blah, blah, blah. We want to come alongside and help. So my first effort is going to be perhaps with fellow neighbors to go find what's going on in there.
It's human beings, right? Ultimately, you want to have human beings living in harmony, not like I heard you weren't living in harmony, so one of y'all is going in a cage.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Like, how is that? Like, that's your solution. Your first impulse is shoot somebody or throw them in a cage.
Yes.
Don't try to get them to live in harmony. Instead, don't try to help them live in harmony. Instead, destroy something and tackle somebody and throw him in a cage. Oh, okay. All right. Like they did to this. Who's that guy who works for Trump that they went and tackled him at his house the other day?
Oh, his campaign manager.
Yeah,
I saw that. Well, these are the conversations we need to have, because what do we do in this situation? How do we respond to that? Well, number one, because I'm a Christian, I come from the framework that anybody can be forgiven of their sins. There is no sin too great that you can't be forgiven of. Otherwise, we kind of cheapen the idea of Jesus' death on the cross, right? It only covers some sins, the acceptable sins. Well, no, he covered all sins. So there's redemption available to all. Now, that doesn't mean redemption excuses or delays justice. There still may need to be justice, but we sometimes have to be careful how we reconcile these ideas. So I'm going to go over there redemption first. I'm going to verify the story, and I'm going to engage this aggressively. I'm going to get involved in it. I'm going to make myself get involved because there's a child at play here. There may be potentially some kind of child abuse going on here. Now, if in the process of that investigation, we find out that there's seems to be some evidence. Well, there's a few things we can do. We can hire a private investigator or a security firm to go do a detail. These are perhaps former detectives in our local police department. We can hire them to go do a detailed assessment of what is going on there. And once all the facts are collected and we now know them as a community, there might be 10, 15, 20 of us that go over to his house, and we now put him on notice. You are part of a broader community of people here. We all live in harmony with each other, and we all watch each other's back. We have concluded that there is some kind of child abuse going on. Here's the steps we're going to take. We are going to offer your wife and the child a free home somewhere. You come live with us.
Right.
We're gonna and then some of us other folks are gonna deal with this guy. We're gonna make it clear that this is unacceptable behavior in our 140 home community here. And now, if she doesn't do that, now let's be real about this. She says no. She's suffering from the abuse spouse syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
And she says no. Well, guess what I'm gonna do? Me and some other guys, we're gonna actually protect that child. We are not going to let him. We are going to remove him from the home. We're going to take him somewhere else so the child can be with mom. And wherever it is we take him, it's going to be maybe into my home. And I'm totally he's under my control with a bunch of other guys that are keeping under control. And if he fights, he fights. Well, we fight back. These are the uncomfortable parts of voluntarism we have a struggle with, because we want to think that anarchy voluntarism leads to peaceful cooperation all the time. Number one, that's antithetical to scripture. Man is fallen. He is flawed. There is going to never be a perfect man. That's why Jesus died on the cross.
But we can we can show examples how this can work. One of the things we do have an advantage in living in the age that we live in is that, no, there is not a anarchist utopia in, the middle of Africa or wherever, that doesn't exist. But there are small communities. Chiron, Mexico is a good example. In Chiron, Mexico, one of the first things they did as a community voluntarily was to establish a security force, which is what you're talking about. These things are all doable and can be proven out. And one of the things I think we face is people not being prepared as anarchists to answer those hard questions like you're doing, Mark. And it's not that hard. There are solutions. There have been people at Murray Rothbard, Ethics of Liberty. He goes through very clearly and maps out how a lot of the laws could be easily done.
Right.
But sorry to interrupt, but there are examples, and we just need to be able to present those when called upon, instead of going
Well, and I have an idea too for that. So beyond because like you went through a scenario of like, here are the different steps we will do, and if this isn't successful, then we'll go to this, and if this is so, like, one of the other ways to look at this, because we always are presented with, well, how is that going to work? How is this going to work? Okay, well, let's talk about how these things fail. So in our current paradigm, when these things fail, innocent people get shot in no-knock raids, in other, police interactions, in traffic stops on the side of the road, or whatever else it could be. People end up in jail, or they don't even stop the thing from happening. The person still keeps getting abused. They actually break the family up and put the kid with the abuser instead of, like, the mom is the abuser, and they typically will rule against the dad. And so you have a lot of those scenarios where you end up where either she's abusive or she has a new boyfriend and he's abusive of his stepkid or whatever live-in kid. You have all those kinds of, so you look at how the current paradigm fails, and it fails miserably, and it's always painful. It's always violent. There's always some sort of major disruption. There's upheaval and everything else. And as I listened to you go through the different scenarios and how you would go about that, and it's very much more like a family intervention kind of scenario.
That's what it is.
Where you're doing it more on a personal, intimate, we know you sort of level. And that goes back to, like, as a Catholic, the term that we use is subsidiarity, where it's like the thing that is the closest and the most intimately connected, the smallest unit possible should address an issue, because it's the one that's the most familiar with the context and with the repercussions of how you handle that issue. So as you went through it, it was really cool because at every step along the way, there's compassion, there's a desire for reconciliation, for healing, for those kinds of things. And at no point was your primary objective punitive or revenue generation.
Right.
It's all because that's what the current paradigm is. It's about punishment and revenue generation, and it's not about reconciliation. It's not about healing, rehabilitation, any of those things. It's not about justice. Exactly. It's not even about justice or about safety and protection. They'll go in and murder people to try to keep them safe. And it's like, what did you,
I know.
Like the thing with you got pulled over for a seatbelt. Okay. You could have been hit by an 18-wheeler on the side of the road.
Yep.
Because you're sitting on the side of the road waiting to get a ticket.
Yeah. For seatbelt.
I mean, you see this stuff happen. I drive like 10 hours a week minimum, and I see these 18-wheelers going down the road. They blow a tire out, and they swing across 4 lanes, and you're just it's only by happenstance that there's not a cop and a civilian pulled over in the spot where they end up on the shoulder. So that's that sort of stuff where and it's always ironic when a motorcycle cop pulls somebody over for their seatbelt. Like, where's your seatbelt, fool?
Exactly right.
Motorcycle.
These are really important discussions because we have to be able to answer these hard questions. Otherwise, we lose credibility.
Well, everybody wants an authoritarian figure. I mean, it's been like shoved down your throat, like to not really be initiative with thought, and when you aren't really in control of, maybe I should question this, or maybe I should, start thinking more into it. People don't genuinely do that. They expect, them to get their directions from their whoever that be in front of them or above them in that sense.
No, that's exactly right. And my daughter just today, we homeschooled all 4 of our now adult children. I've got 6 grandchildren. My daughter just today, she said, public school produced the exact product it was shooting for. People who don't think, that just obey.
Yep.
That's what they produced. And it is true. We see this in the Gen Xers and in the millennial generation. Not that my generation is some stellar generation, because believe me, we got our own problems. But at some level, they were taught to only acquire information from authority figures and then submit to that authority figure. And anarchy calls you to an entirely different way of life. You now have to become the thinking person, because you have to make an analysis about what to do. You have to consider, in my neighborhood of 140 homes, roughly 340 people, how do we live together in peace and harmony, which we will do probably 99.9% of the time. We don't need police or government to help us to do that. We naturally want to do that. And then how do we deal with that 0.1% of the time when somebody went haywire? Because that's going to happen. A lot of what I learned, Chad, to your point, is from the Native Americans, honestly. And when you look at all the tribes in America, they were broken up into, they had many different forms of government. There was no monolithic approach to governance within a tribe. There were some heavily totalitarian type structures, but then the one I just described was actually a structure in one of the tribes. And there was there was a figure that was kind of the arbiter. He was called the pipe smoker, and he would be the investigator, collect the facts, and not based on any legislative law or anything like that. He was just the respected guy in the tribe.
Listen to the evidence, listen to the stories, and then kind of like a parent, basically, where it's like,
tell
me what happened. You tell me what happened. All right,
So
y'all hug each other in the bathroom. Y'all have to like sit there. Y'all are gonna sit together in the bathroom. You're gonna hold hands, and you're not coming out of there until y'all both agree that you're not gonna fight anymore, and you say you're sorry and you love each other. And then like in 2 minutes, they're like, "All right, we're done. We're out of here."
Well, this particular story, this particular tribe, this pipe smoker, he had to deal with a very difficult situation. Two young men got into a fight. One young man in this fight murdered the other man.
Oh, wow.
And so he has to now deal with it. He's the pipe smoker. He's got to issue
the family,
not the sentence. He's got right. He's got 2 families within the tribe that have the potential to really go at it. So what he does is he assesses blame, and then he does this remarkable thing. He leaves it up to the family. You figure it out. What is justice going to look? How is justice going to be satisfied? And so the families started to talk completely differently. It's no longer we're going to go to the chief, and the chief is going to, execute the guy who killed for retribution. There's not, we're not going to take 24 of their goats and, make them tear their teepee down. We're not going to do anything like that. The 2 families are going to figure it out. So the family that lost the son decided that community was more important. So the only punishment was going to be, they wanted to mark this guy who killed their son. They cut his hand off.
Oh, wow.
And that was it. It was over. Once the hand was off, the murderer didn't, plead that I can't. The family of the murderer supported the family that wanted to cut the hand off because they got their son back. Their son's alive.
Right.
Justice is served because that family determined what was justice. That family said, we're not going to take his life. Yes, he took my son's life. We're not going to take it. We could. We're going to just require him to be marked for his life because of his anger, his, hostility, and maybe this will fix him, because it'll be remember forever. He'll remember forever. I don't have a hand here. Why?
Right.
Because I murdered.
Right.
I murdered that guy.
And then if people will see him that same way, and kind of, he'll forever be, kind of trying to reestablish his first impression with new people and everything too. Yeah.
Well, he'll carry that, and maybe he'll turn out to be this unbelievably great guy down the road.
Yeah. Also because of the charity and the mercy that was shown in sparing his life, at least,
Yes. And the tribe saw it.
Right.
And
so Marcus?
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and it does what our justice system doesn't do. It made everybody whole. The idea, no matter,
except for that one guy who lost his hand. No, I'm just joking. Yeah. He's still alive. He's whole in that sense. Like he didn't lose his life.
There was a consequence to his action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he got off scot-free because he's going to have to put up with not having a hand and all that stuff. But because it was agreed upon, and Rothbard gets into this a little bit in Ethics of Liberty as well, that murder is the most difficult kind. I really enjoy that story and will frankly use it. As I move forward.
Right. So I have an idea here real quick. So since Nico hardly ever talks, and we've been busting his balls for not talking that much, I'm going to give you a chance to say what you want to say in just a second. But first, after you say that, I want to challenge you to, because Nico, just so a little background, Nico comes to this not as a libertarian, not as an anarchist.
I'm just out here. I
want Nico to ask us a question that challenges us to like answer it. I want him to like press us on the issue of like, how do you resolve this? So say what you were going to say. And then if you don't mind, I would like to see if you can,
I can figure something out. I just have to, ponder on it for a second. But it was on the fact that I genuinely do agree with. I model some of my life on a lot of the Native Americans' teachings that I only remember and know. Like how they were with their diets and with certain deities and open to a lot of things, but also their community. I most definitely call my friends and very close friends, I call them a tribe, because at the end of the day, it's just an accumulation of people that I genuinely care for. And the idea of the tribe, basically being as a community, I believe communities could do that. It's a lot easier. It's really a lot easier to hold down a community than, expecting one person to lead like 50 different states with like 50,000 different ideologies. But yeah, no, that was it. Now the questions, we're gonna wait on those. We'll have to find something.
All right. Yeah. Think of something like, all right, so something that we have now that like people bring up roads, like we already talked about that. We, and like the thing with like that, abusive relationship type thing. But is there a scenario that you're hey, how would y'all do this?
So like, okay. So if we had a community such as that, where would you guys, because I've seen a couple of videos such as like the Zeitgeist, there are certain things where if we were to have utopia or more of a uncentralized government and more people were to do things, they were saying that it'd be circular and you'd have vegetation in the middle. But without all of those advancements, what would be your like your bigger picture on education? How would you make education? Because granted, we could say we can make it free, but yeah, how will we go about education? That would be my biggest one of my first ones.
Yeah, I've given considerable thought to this particular issue, because I think the product of the current model has been an utter disaster. I think it's just totally been a disaster. I think we have to start, Nico, back to a time when there wasn't compulsory public education and begin to imagine, how did people learn back then? Obviously, the Egyptians built pyramids. There's great artistic works going on in Rome and Greece. There's great philosophy going on. The profound things are occurring throughout recorded human history, and 99% of it happening without compulsory public education. How is that happening? How do we transfer knowledge one to another? Some of that is exactly what we're doing tonight. So I think when you deformalize education and make education more natural and intuitive, the solution is in there. Let me explain what I mean by that. So you go back just 150 years ago, and we're a largely agrarian society, and there's not any technology, obviously. We're living by candlelight. And so there's no time in the day for formal education. You don't really have that time to sit there for 6 hours a day, 180 days a year, because you probably are helping dad out on the farm. You're probably helping just make it that day.
Just to survive and eat. Yeah.
Yes. We forget how tough life was.
Clothes.
Right, exactly. Keep the house up. So it stays up. And so how does education happen? Well, it happens in what we used to call, when I was growing up, on-the-job training. You learned a lot about math. You learned about chemistry from baking and cooking and sowing seeds. And you learned a lot about basic fundamentals of life just in your daily routine. And somehow we wandered into this idea, and there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about it. I don't tend to get into many conspiracy theories. Somehow we ended up with a formalized approach to education that now everybody has to go in here. Well, whose interest has that served, actually? It hasn't produced critical thinkers, people who can actually listen to government lies and detect that they're lies. It hasn't produced them. It has produced a cohort of people that are willing to put their masks on because they were told to. They were told to.
It's created the type of people who are about to be replaced by robots, because that's what they've been.
Yes,
they've been robots for 2 centuries.
They were trained that way.
Yeah.
So we have to, Nico, we have to say, we have to first evaluate the current education system and say, is this it? Did we reach the pinnacle of education in this model? And of course, if you're observant at all, you would say, no, of course we haven't. We've missed it by a mile. Well, then, much like I do with the Constitution, we have to go back to first causes. Why? Why did it fail? Why did the Constitution fail? Why did public education fail? Well, maybe it was never supposed to be formalized. I've got my daughter and her son her son, my daughter and her husband have adopted 4 children out of our Department of Health and Human Services here, our DHS. And they got them when they were 5 years old. And by the time they got them, they were already in trouble. They were just in big trouble. They've had them for years now. And they homeschool their kids, and they have decentralized and deformalized education, because my 12-year-old grandson is not built to sit in a classroom for 6 hours a day.
I know a whole lot of people who are, to be honest.
I think you're right,
Chad. If we're being serious, like, I know I wasn't. I was doodling. I was making mazes. I was telling them a while back, I did this little 10 by 10 grid thing where we play, like, we punch numbers into the calculator, and then you hit the square root button a bunch of times, and the last 2 digits were the coordinates on the grid, and you'd see where, all right, this is a running play. All right, go to the running play grid. All right, he ran for 5 yards. All right, and then you'd move the little thing on the notebook, and we'd do that. We'd sit there, me and my friend would sit in the back of our classroom, and we'd play that, like, for the entire class, like, completely ignoring what was going on. And school's terrible.
I think that's the norm. I don't think people really pay attention there. Nico, I don't know if you did. I didn't, and I went to school.
Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't believe that. Like you said, the schooling system is so backwards. It's so, like, baffling how it's like we haven't looked around as a society and been like, don't you think that, like, education should be free? Oh yeah. Because at the end of the day, who wants a dumb society? Like, who wants dumb people? I know I hate being dumb, and it's not just because of who I am. I think it's just people in general. People just hate being ignorant, because if that was the case, then nobody would be arguing to be right in the first place.
Yeah. So what's funny is people want education to be free, but they want teachers to get paid more at the same time. And I'm like, how, Sway?
So I want to interject something here too. I have a degree in funeral service. The reason that I don't work in the reality of it is, the reason I don't work as a funeral director is because government got in the way. That really is the reason that I don't. There's other reasons that I'm not going to get into, but that's really the reason. And one of the things that I want to bring into the conversation is, Mark, you mentioned that, like, back then you'd get trained by your dad's a farmer, and you'd have to learn the math to be able to do the different things on the farm, what have you, and so that's how you got trained. Well, our society, all I needed, really, I went to school for 3 years to get a degree that did not matter the moment I walked into my internship. It did not matter. So, because none of that mattered at all.
Same here. My broadcasting degree, I was teaching people in my classes because I was working at a TV station as an intern while I was in school. And I was like coming home, I was like, no, that's not how you do this. You do it like this. So, editing videos.
But these same people in this world will say, after hearing your story, Mark, will say, yeah, but that's farming. And that's, this and that and the other thing. At the same time, are going to an office where they have hired a 17-year-old intern for free to work. They aren't paying them a thing to work instead, and sending their son, who maybe because his dad's a whatever kind of.
Oh, instead of having their kid work for them.
Right. Instead of having them send him to Harvard or wherever, instead of having him learn whatever the business is.
Right.
And so what I'm getting at is that it isn't just the kind of skills that we had 100 years ago. So many times the people that argue with us want to say, well, you just want to go back to the olden days. No, it's not like. It's not like computers are going to stop existing if government goes away.
Right. Well, not only that, but, like, I think another thing that people are missing in all this stuff is, like, what do we have? Like, if you really, really break it down, competing curricula in the U.S. for, like, K through 12 education. I would argue we have one curriculum.
Yeah.
There might be 5, and we're really talking about, like, the difference between politicians, right? Like, the difference isn't like one of them is like this radically different thing and this other one is this other radically different. No, like, it's like on the margins. There's so much overlap. The Venn diagram looks like a bunch of concentric circles. It's not there. There's one curriculum for K through 12 education in the U.S. Okay, and really, like to a large extent, almost worldwide. I think maybe you get into Asia and India and stuff like that. It's a little bit different, but it's still like here in the U.S. It's all the same. Like you're learning all that. So let's take that's when you have government running education. Now, let's say, what do you think the world would look like if the government ran websites, magazines, and TV stations? How many do you think you'd have? Do you think you'd have, like, you go into back in the day when there were lots of magazines, before like paper. I work in the paper industry, and like the paper industry is struggling, especially in the printing paper area. Linerboard, great, because Amazon boxes, you got to keep making them. But so cardboard is fine, but printing paper, not so much. Well, you go into like one of these newsstands, magazine shops, or whatever. There are hundreds of different like all these different guns, knitting, all kinds of stuff. Like, look at Pinterest. Go to Pinterest and look at all the different things that people do stuff with on there. That's what education should look like. It should be this like cornucopia of different avenues you could go in and different learning styles and all these different things. And so my argument would be, like, I think we're already seeing what education looks like without government right now on YouTube, on Pinterest, in magazines, in all these different places where, yes, like homeschooling and those kinds of things. But even with that, like a lot of people are following a homeschool curriculum because you have to, because that's what the state mandates, that you have to check off these boxes so that you can not get arrested for truancy or some bullshit, so it's like you have that stuff going on. But I look at the expanse of different possibilities that would exist if you had a private answer that replaced this whole thing, and you just said, just did one thing, just remove truancy from our whole vernacular and everything, like take it off the books to where if you don't want to send your kids to school, you don't have to send your kids to school, and you just let them learn independently, and you can facilitate them learning. First of all, it would save a whole lot of people a lot of money on like daycare and all this other stuff. Well, it would save me a lot of money. People who send their kids to public school, I guess maybe not, because they're, I'm paying for the public school tuition with property taxes and everything else, and I'm paying private school tuition for my kids to go to school, and it ain't cheap. But yeah, you do all those things, and I can't help but think that my kids would have a more productive childhood in terms of getting them ready for the next level if they weren't spending 4 of those 8 hours a day doing menial stuff that is just so that they can make an excuse to have them there for 8 hours a day.
See, and this is where I think we've got the answer for this. We've got a beautiful answer for this. It's called the free market. If you turn the free market loose on education, it will provide, as you just said, Chad, hundreds of opportunities for your children to grow intellectually and to be stimulated in something they're designed to do. This rote, everybody has to do X, Y, and Z to be standardized. This whole standardized approach to education has been a disaster, an utter disaster. And now you've got 18-year-olds graduating who literally hated their career. They got nothing from it. Sometimes because of their boredom, they ended up getting themselves in trouble. Right. And because they were just bored stiff. And the free market would immediately take the temperature of the, X number of millions of students that are in school
and offer an alternative.
What is what's the offering? Look at the Khan Academy. The Khan Academy. You can learn anything on the Khan Academy right now. And who says 6 hours, 180 days a year is sacrosanct? Who says?
Right.
Who says that is? So what if 1 hour is sufficient for an eight-year-old? Right. 1 hour a day of reading something they like to read.
And instead get some sunlight and go do some stuff outside, connect with nature.
What I ran into is my little sister is doing the remote learning, and goodness gracious, I love her, but she can't like sit down. She's like all over the place. She won't sit down, and I'm like thinking to myself, this is a little kid, and I'm getting frustrated because I'm expecting her to sit down in front of a computer for longer than 30 minutes.
Yep.
It's absolutely ridiculous. It is a mind-wrenching, like, I just want to grab my brain out my head and hit it with a baseball bat because it makes no sense.
Yeah, and so what did they spend the 90s and the early 2000s, and they're still doing it now, drugging those kids.
Right.
So
And
that
Nico,
they would conform better. I mean, it's horrible.
Nico, where did you get that idea from? That she had to, that somehow she's wrong if she's not sitting in front of that computer. We were all trained to believe somehow our children, our sisters, our brothers, our children are not learning if they're not in some structured education program. You were trained that way. I was trained that way. And now the volunteerist in us has to say, I want to shatter those paradigms. And I want to offer what I already experienced myself. I hated school. I hated it. I didn't really enjoy learning until I was in my 20s. And it had nothing to do with public education. And public education did not prepare me.
Well, you were probably learning stuff that you chose to learn, right?
Yes.
You're like,
exactly.
I want to learn more about this. Let me go explore it. And then you're like hungry for it instead of being force-fed food you didn't want to eat in the first place.
You know what it is? I actually just went through this. I went through like a mini little sadness because I didn't know who the hell I was. But in all actuality, that's what schooling does. And that's what pisses me off is that they don't give us time to figure out who the hell we are, what we like, and like what we want to go through. And so like living in a Black household, like I can't say like it's not like this, but in Black households, college is like a big thing. So my grandmother is a Haitian immigrant, and she's brought a lot of people over here, and she went through nursing school. She busted her ass beyond belief. And then my all of my family, her brothers and sisters did great, went to college, this, that, and the third. And all I hear from my grandmother is, how is it that I'm the only one with a son who has other sons who didn't go to college, but everybody else did they shit? Where are my boys? What are y'all doing? And I'm like, Granny, I'm trying to do something good.
Nico's 22, by the way. So he's
gotcha.
Yeah, so me and Marcus we're in our mid 40s, and Nico's a little pup over there. We're trying to give him all this download so he doesn't make the same mistakes we made. But I think he's way ahead of where we were to begin with. That's why he's here.
Way better than I was.
There was an enlightenment that I saw in Nico that was already there that I was like, man, we gotta have this. We gotta have him come on. And
I don't know Nico at all, but beyond today, and my hope increases because I realize,
doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. I look at Nico and I think, well, this is who we must be talking to,
right?
Because Nico needs to become a leader in this, and he needs to see his role as helping that generation. My generation is leaving. I'm exiting stage right. I know that, and I'm perfectly content with that. But I want to leave behind to the Nikos and even to you guys that are younger than I am, that this is not a hopeless cause, but we've got to be able to have these conversations, and we have to be confident in what we're saying. I know I can say with complete confidence the public education system is an utter disaster. It puts out cookie cutter people. It takes away their personality. It destroys their individualism. It makes them non-curious. It makes them compliant, and I hate that. Why wouldn't I want to destroy the public education system? Because it did to people that I know and love and care about what it did to them. It did to me. I was just fortunate enough that I had people come alongside of me and break me out of that paradigm.
Yeah.
And so we have to speak with confidence and a certain commitment to what we believe, that we have a better way. The free market absolutely will destroy the public education system and create thinkers. And guess what government does not want? Government does not want thinkers, because their position as the elite amongst us is challenged by thinkers. They can't handle the four of us multiplying. They
cannot
don't want
control the four of us. That's why.
Yes. And so I get inspired by these conversations, and I believe that maybe I'll live long enough to see it. But public education, Nico, your instincts are leading you in the right way. There's something broken there. But yet it also has to lead you to figure out, I love my sister, and how do I help her not follow in the path I'm following in education? How do I make her, like, I'm having this conversation with my daughter and her husband right now about innovative education and gift-based, passion-based education with their 5 children. Because my grandson Kyle likes to be outdoors. He's probably going to end up a conservationist somewhere. He's going to end up, out in the woods. Why can't he learn out there?
Right.
Well, he can. He can learn if we can find, some forestry management people to let him OJT with them 3 hours a day. Right. He would learn a ton. Engineers, a future engineer could learn a ton at 12 going to an engineering firm and just being there all day. They'd be great engineers. They would learn, so we don't look at our children
or they would figure out in 3 months that they definitely don't want to be an engineer.
Yes.
instead of finding out after you got a 4-year degree and you're like, oh my God, what did I do?
Yes. And we don't, why can't a 14-year-old hang out in a doctor's office with a doctor all day? Because stupid labor laws prevent it. Because government prevents it. You're truant. You're not in the classroom listening, to some unskilled teacher teach you something from the curriculum that they, don't really know themselves. And so the whole system is just horrible. And I was talking to somebody just today about this, oddly enough. This person was advocating we got to work within the system. And I said, no, change only comes from big ideas. You got to destroy the current system in order to build a new one. You will never reform the current system. Never.
No.
Never.
Well, and I would argue that you don't necessarily have to destroy the other system. You just have to make the alternative and then attract people to it.
Yep. Good point. Yeah,
Praxis is one of the ways that's starting to do that. It's a similar thing where there's some OGT mixed with some theoretical and some philosophical stuff and everything. What were you going to say, Marcus?
I was actually going to kind of direct us towards wrapping up.
Oh, okay.
I have something to tie all this in.
All right.
Oh my gosh, it's 10 o'clock.
I know.
Yeah.
So this ties everything we've talked about together. And this is actually a song. Because when we talk about both religion and politics and anarchy and faith and all of these things, they seem like they're such different ideas. And they're not. They're not that different. And, Mark, I really appreciated you sharing your vision of what religion means to you and how it ties in. I want to introduce, because this idea of challenge is particular to something that I care very deeply about. And that is my vision of Jesus from a non-Christian point of view. And this is a song by a Christian that is, and was introduced to me by my wife, who's also a non-Christian. But this is a song by a man named Michael Card. And if you're not familiar with him, I strongly suggest this song. Because to me, Jesus was a great man. And he was a great man for different reasons than a lot of what is traditional Christians like to think of. And I think that this song, which I'm going to read, typifies how I see Jesus and how I think that both Christians and anarchists alike could learn from this fantastic human being. Because again, I will quote Aleister Crowley, who said that Jesus may or may not have been a man, but he certainly was a God. And so this is scandalon, which means stumbling stone in Greek. And this is the song. The seers and the prophets had foretold it long ago, that the long-awaited one would make men stumble. But they were looking for a king to conquer and to kill. Who'd ever thought he'd be so weak and humble? He will be the truth that will offend them one and all, a stone that makes men stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. I'm going to get emotional just to let you know.
Go ahead, man. Don't make
And
me
a rock
cry,
that
though.
makes them fall. Many will be broken so that he can make them whole, and many will be crushed and lose their own soul. Along the path of life there lies a stubborn scandalon, and all who come this way must be offended. To some he is a barrier, to others he's the way. For all should know the scandal of believing. He will be the truth that will offend them one and all, a stone that makes men stumble, a rock that makes them fall. Many will be broken so that he can make them whole. The many will be crushed and lose their own soul. It seems today the scandalon offends no one at all. The image we present can be stepped over. Could it be that we are like the others long ago? Will we ever learn that all who come must stumble? He will be the truth that will offend them one and all. A stone that makes men stumble, a rock that makes them fall. Many will be broken so that he can make them whole, and many will be crushed and lose their own soul. He will be the truth that will offend them one and all, a stone that makes men stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. Many will be broken so that he can make them whole, and many will be crushed and lose their own soul. So that is Michael Card, Scandalon.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that song, and there's great truth in that song. And when you think about even our calendars, generally are designed around that act of Jesus Christ entering the world. So until we recently come up with CE and BCE, it used to be BC and AP. And what was the centerpiece of all that? The entrance of Jesus Christ into the world. He changed everything, literally changed everything. And whether believer or not, he still defines the conversations that we have. And boy, that's a good thing. That is a wonderful thing. And, he made some very audacious, I should say, claims. And these claims are either true or they're not. And if they're not true, then he's nothing more than a maniac. If they're true, then he's God. And then that has implications for all of us, right? At the end of the day, if he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father by me.
Right.
That's about as audacious as you get. So either he's a maniac making that claim, or he's God making that claim. And if he says that, then that has implications for every human being on the planet who hears those words. He says in another place, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. That's an audacious claim. Every knee, or just Christian knees, or Western European knees? Every knee will bow.
Right.
That's an audacious claim.
Yeah.
And if it's true, that has implications.
Right.
So this is the critical thinking that Jesus forces upon us. He makes some audacious claims. Either they're true, and I was just going to write today, Marcus, it's just absolutely providential you brought that up. I was just going to write today an article about how we as human beings work to limit who Jesus Christ is.
Yeah.
We create denominations. We create theologies. We create ecclesiologies that are attempting to box him in. And he's so much grander than those denominations, those theologies, those ecclesiastical structures. He's so much bigger than all that. And yet our finite human minds want to bring him down to this. I wish I had time. Wish you guys could find it. There's a Marcus. You should watch this one video by his name is Dr. S.M. Lockridge, and he does this famous speech where he talks about it's titled My King, and he lists off all the attributes of Jesus Christ. And then he closes at the very end. He's a black preacher, and he's got this just powerful cadence, and he's just letting everybody have it with this imagery of who Jesus is. And then he says, "That's my King. Do you know him?" And it just stops there. And it's like,
yeah, that's awesome.
Do you know him? And so, anyways, Marcus, I totally floored you brought that up, because that was right along my feet today.
Yeah, we do. So one of my big so like it was weird. Like, it started off, I was a conservative, and then I like found this like libertarian, but I actually voted for Bill Clinton in 1992. So I was a weird, like, I was 18 and it was like my first election. I got suckered into, like, similar to like people who were like voting for Biden because they're like, well, Trump's racist, so you have to vote for Biden, that kind of thing. I didn't even know libertarians existed or anything like that back then. But anyway, as I went through the process of, like, I started to see, like, hey, wait a second, like, there's something wrong with this two-party thing. And like, I feel like it's my mission to try to solve that and like bring everybody together. And like, and so then I found like libertarianism, found like this whole philosophy of voluntarism, anarchism, and everything. And one of the other things that was like kind of dovetailed with that was like ecumenism, where I saw like this fracturing, almost this like Babylonian sort of, and Nico and Marcus probably get tired of hearing me say this, but I equate like all of the different denominations in Christianity, but even like the non-Christian religions and all the different faiths around the world. It's just all those different languages when we got broken apart, trying to describe what we envision God as, and we're just using different words, and it's not worth fighting over. It's actually worth coming together over, because the real enemy that we need to be fighting is the one that's trying to keep us from God, and trying to determine who has the perfect route to God is a lot less important than trying to make sure that we aren't helping the evil one keep us all from God. And that we're not fighting with each other, that we're not in disharmony, because ultimately it's unity, it's harmony. We say this a lot too, like, as human beings, we're made for like love and connection, we're made for joy, ecstasy, bliss, and we're made for eternity. And we we sense these things in how different things in the world that happen to us affect our emotions, affect how we kind of respond to that stuff. Like we want good things to last forever. We feel like bad things are never going to end. And we're desperate to try to like, when is this lockdown stuff going to end? When is what I mean? Like, this feels like it's never going to end. And then, hopefully 10 years from now, we'll look back and be like, hey, remember that coronavirus thing? So like that sort of stuff. But then we're also like, we are meant to be in joy. And if you think about it on a God level, like at what level does God experience joy? Is it just like chewing bubble gum?
Yeah.
Or is it beyond orgasmic?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're made. That's what we're in the sense that, we're talking about like being made in God's image. That's kind of what I connect to, is love and connection, that ecstasy, bliss, that like unnameable peace that passes understanding type of thing. And then eternity. We're made to live forever in that state with God, one with God and one with one another. And so I try to spend as much of my time as I can not arguing about the differences with all the different denominations, or even with, among the different religions, and just saying like, hey, are we all trying to be in harmony with each other and bring happiness and connection and love?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I'm digging it, man. So, well, guys, man, I'm super thrilled you had me on. I'm really humbled and honored. And
thank you for coming.
Forward to future conversations.
Chad will get this up, but not this last hour, but the first hour Chad will get up probably tonight, and I will post it probably on my lunch hour tomorrow, and I will share it directly to you when it's up. And I'll share it to you in Messenger, and then I'll put it on Aquarian Anarchy, and I will tag you on my page when I post it.
Okay.
And so thank you. This has been one of my favorites thus far.
Yeah, no, I was about to say, no doubt.
And to put you're in good company. We've had some killer guests. We lead
I'm humbled.
really cool life.
Wow, man, I'm super humbled by that, guys. It's I think there's kindred spirit here, and it's just easy, to have these kind of conversations. Imagine the day we're having this with 10 million people, and
right.
All these conversations are going everywhere. So
yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, and I want to give a shout out to Halima, our favorite Patreon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Stay free.
Peace.